when I first Googled you, one of the first top searches were Xueling pretty. It does seem as if it's not that you are held to an unfair standard, but there are different kinds of markers or indicators that they kind of look at as you as a woman compared to you as a man.
It is interesting that you mentioned this actually, because I was in a recent dialogue with Madam President with SCWO, and Madam President brought up that she had read online that there were various comments about what the women office holders wore at the swearing-in ceremony at the Istana. Actually, I didn't know that beforehand. I was, of course, very, very grateful for the opportunity, and also, proud of the moment. It's like I'm taking up my responsibility. I have responsibilities for, fellow citizens, and all sorts of thoughts were going through my mind. And then at the end of the day, when you read online that actually what people are thinking about was what you wore, then you're kind of duh,
Hi, welcome back to Something Private, a podcast for Southeast Asian women by Southeast Asian women, exploring conversations around health, the self, community, and love. My name is Nicole and I am your producer and host. Singapore is currently working on a white paper on gender equality. Pretty monumental stuff. So white papers are basically policy documents produced by the government that set out their proposals for future legislation. Now, Singapore has done quite a fair bit in terms of gender equality. Most notably, you guys might remember updates to the Penal Code in 2019, when they repealed marital rape immunity and enhanced protection for victims in the Protection Against Harassment Act. But it seems as if everything up until then was pretty much reactive, and there was nothing much done to address the root of some quite serious societal biases we had. But with the announcement of the white paper, which would involve year-long national conversations, it seemed like finally a proactive step towards tackling the core of the decay of our society. Okay, that was really dramatic. I'm kidding. But one thing they brought up, which I thought was really a point to note, was about the idea of mindset change. So of course, being a podcast centered around having conversations to drive change, we needed to be involved. At the core of the team leading these conversations are three female members of parliament, Xueling, Rahayu Mazam and Low Yenling. Today we've invited Xueling, the Minister of State in the Ministry for Education and Ministry for Social and Family Development, okay, really long title, we know, to chat with us. We're gonna do two things. The first, to flesh out the details of the review, how it's gonna be carried out, and the second, how everyday individuals like you and I can participate in it and have our voices heard.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Xueling. I'm currently the Minister of State at the Ministry of Education as well as the Ministry of Social and Family Development. I joined politics in 2015. Before that, I had spent my entire career in the private sector. Fun fact, right? I have two daughters. They are 3 and 7. I spent all my waking hours apart from work with them. That's my strongest desire. I think about my daughters the first thing when I wake up in the morning and the last thing before I go to bed. Because they make me so happy. I just like to say that. Yeah.
So sweet. Okay, thanks a lot for being here. I think one of the big things that we're going to talk about, the big thing that we're going to talk about on today's episode is the gender equality white paper that was announced earlier in September. So I think, can you just briefly tell me what the white paper will entail, and I guess how the government intends to roll it out?
Okay. We actually launched this Conversations on Women's Development on the 20th of September. But moving forward for the next 1 year, we intend to have more than 100 conversations. These can be large-scale ones. There could be very small ones as well. There could be conversations in a very intimate setting, maybe say 20 or 30 young people, for instance. So we are not going to be too, formal about how we intend to structure these conversations. What is important is that we want to get the whole society talking about it. Because obviously, firstly, women are half, our citizens, and the conversation should go beyond what should be legislated. and also into our social consciousness, because we are all we are all either mothers or we have sisters, or and like I mentioned, I have daughters, so we want to collectively think as a society how we want to further improve, and further move forward, where women are concerned. So, and we want men and women to be part of the conversation. So, the launch on the 20th of September was just the start of it. And moving forward, we really hope to encourage more members of the public to step forward, in particular youths, because it is the future Singapore we want to build together. We are looking at a huge variety of organisers. So at the national level, this could be, for instance, the NTUC or SCWO. But there are also sectoral conversations we're thinking of having. So these could be led by some of the NGOs, the women's organizations, also some of the business associations, because we obviously want to involve professional women as well, women in workplaces. And also at a more local level, student organizations from the schools, the different schools, and also in the heartlands as well, because we also do not want to miss out, our homemakers, our aunties. They are important women in our midst as well. So as you can see, the organization of it, I think it's going to be very important, because that will ensure the outreach and ensuring that more members of the public are able to get involved. So in the next 1 year, you will see more dissemination of information on the various touch points members of the public can get involved through. And apart from the conversations, there's also various online channels whereby they can write in emails or provide feedback online through an email or something. If they're not comfortable to be part of a physical conversation, they can also write into us.
Okay, that sounds great, because I think that, I guess that was a brief announcement of the initiative, and then later on you're rolling out the parts, right?
Yes.
I want to know, and I think this is something that some people have been questioning also, right? Why now to have, I guess, this white paper? Why is now a good time?
Actually, if we take a step back, if we look at national indicators of how women have progressed, literacy indicators, 96%. If we look at employment indicators, more than 70% of women are employed. If we look at the number of women graduates, the number of women in STEM professions, we rank very well.
Yep.
Right? So we are actually starting on strong foundations. But if we look at it from another angle, we had the Women's Charter in 1961. And since then, there have been periodic updates.
Yep.
And there have been changes to different parts of legislation that relate to issues around women, or that women are interested in. We have also had revisions to certain criminal penalties on offences that are conducted against women. But actually, these are largely, if I may say so, piecemeal. They focus on different issues that pop up. But it's quite different from a national conversation. Because when you have a national conversation involving different stakeholders and members of the public, then you go beyond legislation. You go beyond specific problems. We actually had a survey of about 1,000 respondents, and from the issues that were surfaced, we felt that they could be put into different domains, which would allow us to delve deeper individually into the domains. So the domains are, for instance, home, workplaces, and the school, and also community. So for instance, for the home, there could be topics such as, the role of early education and values, role models, and also family violence. So family violence is an area that I'm paying particular attention to, because I used to be at the Ministry of Home Affairs and now at the Ministry of Social and Family Development. And we have unfortunately noticed a certain trend in the number of inquiries about family violence because of the COVID-19 situation and the stresses that families now come under, arising from the economic challenges of COVID-19. That's just the home environment. For schools, we obviously have, primary, secondary, JC, polys, and we will look at ensuring that there is equal access and opportunities for every boy and every girl to realize his dreams and their pursuits. And beyond that, for institutes of higher learning, for example, our autonomous universities, there has been, unfortunately, a few incidents whereby there is concerns about sexual offences that are committed in the universities. Our workplaces, women have also shared with us that there might be workplace discrimination practices, glass ceiling, concerns about being unfairly penalized because they go on maternity leave or they have to take leave to take care of the children. And in the larger community, what are our perspectives on women? Do we have gender stereotypes about how we respect women? Do we show that in the language that we use? Do we also show that in our choice of role models for our children, for instance? I think these are some of the larger topics. So I thought that having the issues kind of broadly put into different domains will allow us to have a more in-depth conversation to ensure that no topics are left out inadvertently. There is no specific split of responsibilities amongst the three public office holders who are looking into these conversations. And very importantly, we're going to involve men in the conversation because they're going to be part of the solution, if not a very large part of the solution. So it's not just three women public office holders talking and deciding what the topics are. That's not the way we envision this.
I mean, from what you said, it does seem as if like you guys did survey first and then determine these are the areas.
I wouldn't say determine, but it highlights some of the issues. And I'm very, very, very sure that as we have more conversations, more issues will surface. And that's why it's going to be almost like the white paper is almost going to be like a living document also. We are going to be collating all these responses. Some people may have suggestions on how to address some of the issues that come up. But the white paper is not like a cast in stone, decided from the onset what are the issues that will be discussed. It's going to be a collation of the suggestions that come up. And it's going to be discussed in Parliament. As I mentioned, some of it might be legislatable, some might not be. And I think that's probably the most important part of it. And the engagement process is important and in some ways perhaps even more important than the end outcome. Because sometimes it is through the process of conversations that people start questioning your own assumptions. And then you start asking yourself, is this the right way to look at women? Is what I'm saying at home furthering stereotypes? Am I limiting my daughter through the words I use, through how I encourage her, for instance? Am I, for instance, as an employer, subconsciously portraying certain biases I may have as an employer through certain HR practices I practice in the office? So these are the conversations, these are the thoughts we want people to start thinking about. Then everyone can be a part of the solution.
I want to go back to asking a bit about the motivation behind the white paper, because I think that I agree that, like Singapore, we have enjoyed a fair share of equality for a very long time, and women here face a whole series of different issues and problems, very unlike those in our, I guess, like neighboring countries or like around the world. We see like certain levels of discrimination being like carried out, right? So was there like a trigger or like a conversation that you guys had internally that made you realize that, or gave you the green light to saying that, okay, maybe this is something that we should put forward in action, right? Because I think all the steps like the Protection Order Act, the repeal of the marital rape and everything, I think that was really, really well done. But it did feel as if like we needed this bigger conversation, like you mentioned.
I think in Singapore, we are quite open And I think the power divide between men and women is not as wide as in some other Asian societies. But regardless, I think we still have to chip away at some of the subconscious biases that certain segments of the population may have. So on the question that you posed to me as to whether there was a trigger, I don't think there is a specific incident that says that because of this, therefore we are launching this conversation. But there is a view that since the Women's Charter in 1961, and we have put in place various interventions through legislative changes, some of which you mentioned.
Yep.
But we felt that there is a point now whereby it would be important and useful for us to have a collective discussion as to what we can do more about to improve and empower and uplift our women. It's part of us growing up together as a society and as a nation, And this may be stating the obvious, but women are a very important part of our society, right? Mothers, sisters, daughters, We care for the women in our midst. And I think it is one thing to say we care, it's quite another thing to say, let's do something about it.
Yep.
Let's talk about it.
Yep.
What do we need the government to do? What do we need employers to do? What do we ourselves individually need to do to change some of these ideas we have about women?
I have two questions. Okay, I'll go for the first one first.
Yes.
I want to know to what extent did some of these instances of like sexual harassment and violence culminate to this white paper today? Because I mean, in the last 2 years, I think Singapore's own movement against towards better gender equality has taken off quite a bit, and I think there's a large part of it that has to do with some of the very high profile cases that we've seen in the news, for instance, right? So I want to know, my question is what part of it culminated to the white paper? And I think the second question is that with the whole idea of engaging the community, right? You're right, that people come from different places. I think that for our audience, I think we have an idea of what kind of society we want to live in. But I think the challenge then comes with tightening the gap between the two different mindsets, right? The thing that comes to mind is for instance, if I want to have a conversation with my family about gender-based violence or family violence that's happening, how do I kind of get them to see where I'm coming from, but also to see where they are coming from, for instance.
So on your first question, I can't give a scientific answer to it, to say that because this case happened or that happened and that was the trigger and this was the
result.
The result. I don't think we can draw a straight line in that way. But suffice to say that the incidents that have happened in the Institutes of Higher Learning, the offences that had occurred, and if we look at the situations around the offences, for example, the use of mobile devices, right? Some of which was shared in public, about the relationships that the victim and the perpetrator had, or what were the triggers that led to the perpetrator, committing the offence. I think all those are interesting points that lead us to a larger question about how is society, how are young people looking at relationships, how they are looking at digital content, how they are making use of mobile devices, as an expression of their innermost thoughts. I think various questions have been raised, which lead us to the larger question about the objectification of women, the respect and the boundaries between boys and girls, the type of relationships people have. So those are the questions that have come up. Yes, and there are also, because of the COVID-19 situation, it has also highlighted the stresses that lead to family violence, for instance. So what I would say is that pockets of this things that are surfacing, lead us to question where we are going, what can we do, what more can we do, how do we involve men and women into the conversation, how can everyone be a part of the solution.
Yep.
And like I mentioned earlier, the white paper is a way for us to collate the responses and have everyone come together and know that this is what we want to do together. Yeah, but it is not a piece of legislation. After the white paper comes out, we will have to decide what parts of it should be legislated for maximum effect. What other parts of it are going to be more about mindset changes so that real change will actually happen on the ground. In the second point you raised about how people surface problems, you mentioned family violence.
Yep.
So we are first and foremost increasing the number of channels in which victims or potential victims can reach out to help themselves. Very clearly, in the past half a year that I've been looking at, actually more than half a year, so in the past 1 year that I've been looking at this topic, I think what has been very clear is that while we call it domestic violence, or some people say family violence, as a society we do not accept that it is a personal or a family-only problem. It shouldn't happen behind closed doors. I think it's quite clear that stakeholders, people who care about the topic, are saying very firmly that this is an issue that the entire society needs to look at. We need to make sure that vulnerable members of the public are protected. There are avenues of help. It is not just a family issue, even if we may call it family violence. I think it's quite clear that we are very firm in our view on that. That being said, we need to make sure that there are channels that people can be able to contact for help, be it a hotline, be it a safe place, be it crisis shelters, be it counselors who proactively follow up with victims or potential victims, and also working with the police, for instance, ensuring that when the authorities come in, they come in with a proper mindset. There is sensitivity when they talk to victims or potential victims, that they go also beyond that. Sometimes it is not just about whether an offense has been created, but rather, is there risk of another offense happening? And how are we going to prevent that from happening? So the involvement of the family violence specialist centers, the FSCs, the family service centers, that's going to be very important because these are our partners on the ground and they're reaching out to families.
That's the first step, right? If let's say something bad happens at home, then the victims or the survivors know that this is a place that they can reach out to. But on the flip side, right, how do we then communicate to the perpetrators that this is an action that is wrong, or that, this is not just a concern that happens within like the family?
Yes. We've had focus group discussions with our stakeholders. I did one in August. There were about 42 stakeholders who had that conversation together with the Ministry of Social Family Development as well as the MHA. And it's quite clear that we also need to work on the perpetrators.
Yep.
We actually had a focus group discussion in August, and we actually specifically discussed what we can do with regards to perpetrators. So for instance, how do we apply for domestic exclusion orders? Can we think about removing the perpetrator from the family rather than removing the victims from the family? It's an important signaling effect. Yeah? Go more upstream on our intervention methods. For instance, some of the perpetrators, they could jolly well be suffering from anger management issues or an inability to deal with financial challenges. So if we go to the root causes of what triggers them to commit family violence, I think that would be helpful. So we work on the perpetrators rather than just provide counseling or provide shelter to the victim, because that is very downstream. We want to look at what we can do upstream with the perpetrators as well. Personally, I have come across myself family violence situations. I personally feel that the anger management part of it is actually very, very important. Sometimes in different contexts, I hate to say this, but the truth of the matter is that most of the perpetrators are men. They may find some difficulty in conveying their emotions. They may not know how to solve some of the problems they face, and they end up externalizing it on the people around them. And this could be just, their wife, their helpless children, or even a vulnerable adult like an elderly parent. It could be that he did not intend it to be so, but because he could not mediate within himself and find that balance, he externalized it. And the form of it is family violence. But if we do not try to solve the root problem, and there are case examples where we have gone at it at the root causes, and we have seen that it has improved subsequent behavior. So if we do not go at the root causes, then we are simply just addressing the problem as they arise.
I want to know if, on the topic of addressing the perpetrator, right, does this extend to beyond just family violence? Because I think with some of the things that we mentioned just now, like the enhancement of the protection order to victims, right? A lot of times, I don't want to say it sweepingly, but we see that, offences are still like carried out, or that, the victims still don't come forward with whatever situation they might have faced, possibly because they know this perpetrator like personally. So I think my question is, how do we then tackle that aspect of it in a different situation outside family violence?
I think one important area that has come up is with how we look at the issue. So one way of us looking at it is to look at the different archetypes of violence, where violence has occurred. So for instance, if it's family violence, is it because this is a young couple who are facing financial stresses, who have many children and are feeling ill-equipped to handle the children? Is it this type? Or is it a situation of, let's say for instance, caregiving stress from having to manage on a daily basis a vulnerable elderly person, or even a person with special needs? Because there's also caregiving stress that can sometimes lead to some form of violence because the so-called perpetrator breaks. So the reason why we are looking at archetypes is not because we want to be academic about it and all that, but it allows us to frame the potential issues around it and how we may start thinking about solutions. And this is where we work with our stakeholders, we work with people, practitioners, because it's not just an academic understanding or a theoretical understanding, or using our it's like a hypothesis kind of thing. It's not that. It's going to have to be validated by what we see on the ground. So that's an important area of work the Family Violence Task Force is looking at. And then when we look at the situations in the institutes of higher learning, then we have to go deeper and ask ourselves, why are our young men thinking about women in a certain way? What kind of content are they consuming privately that leads them to think about women in that way? Why is it that they will wantonly use their mobile device and go film someone in a shower, or take upskirt videos? And that where is that threshold? Do they not know that it is disrespectful to women? I mean, the women could be like their mothers, their sisters, or next time their daughters, So why is it that it doesn't inhibit them? Is it that the threshold of self-regulation has become so low? And then, of course, the larger question is, what can we do about it? Is it really just about education? I think education is important. Ensuring that, since young, we have honest conversations. And also about the content that they are reading online. Are there some AI methods whereby unhealthy content can be better regulated? I don't have the answer. Like I said, we've only just had the first conversation. But I think we need to start thinking about these things, because otherwise we'll forever just be dealing with the downstream impact. And then it will be case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4. And obviously every single case has its own unique factors. But I think what we need to do, be it as a policy maker or as a society that wants to do something about it, is to identify the underlying factors that are consistent amongst the various cases. And then to say, can we do something about it? I think that's the important bit of work, that if we want really to solve the issue, nip it in the bud, then collectively we have to identify those underlying factors and start thinking very hard how to address them.
Okay, maybe I'll give a more specific example. So for instance, like with issues on like sexual violence or family violence, for instance, I think if you ask somebody from a younger generation, they'll tell you like, oh, so simple, like, okay, not so simple, but, just do this, or like these are the steps that should be in place for us. These are the safety nets that should be available. But then I guess like if you ask somebody from an older generation, the perspective might be a bit different, right? So how do we then, and it gets very heated, like, the younger generation will be like, no, this is so straightforward, this shouldn't be the case, but somebody from an older generation might not see it that way. So I guess like how do you help society collectively see eye to eye on that?
I think even though Singapore is a very young nation, and we're very multicultural. The reason why I mention it is because actually we are not that homogeneous as a society. There are differences in perspectives, young and old, maybe also between the different races or people with different religious affiliations. Even maybe how men think about certain issues are different from how women think about certain issues. So society is not homogeneous. Perhaps even more so in a multicultural context that Singapore finds itself in now. But I think one thing is very clear, which is Singaporeans have a very strong sense of what is fair and what is just. And where violence is concerned, I think largely nobody condones violence. Especially when it is conducted against a vulnerable person. When we talk about vulnerable, for instance, if you were to use brute force, I mean, whether or not we agree, I think the average male is perhaps physically stronger than the average female. So there is that power dynamic, and obviously between a healthy young person versus a vulnerable elderly, again, there is disparate ability, right? So I think where there is violence conducted against a more vulnerable person, I think we are, as a society, unanimous in saying that we do not agree with this. And that when such an offence has happened, then the appropriate penalty needs to be meted out. I think we're quite clear where this is concerned. Sometimes there may be a discussion about what was the trigger. Did the victim deserve it? Yeah,
which is the issue, right?
Which is the issue. That goes before the courts. Because it's there could be very particular circumstances behind each case. But I think in this day and age on social media, members of the public would actively get involved in discussion and share their views about whether they felt that situation should have become the way it developed and what are the penalties that should be meted out.
Going on to the point of that people are free and open to express their views on social media these days, right?
Yes.
Then you get instances where, let's say, if it's a case of like sexual violence, then you do hear comments where people say like, what was she wearing? Or, like, did she find herself in that situation? So I think it's good that when we talk about like mindset change, we address like how we bring up our children from young. But if in the first place, like, there is a difference in the starting points in terms of like where each individual come from, then how do we then tell like maybe a grown adult that this is what is wrong and this is how you should reconsider the situation?
Yes. Actually, that's precisely why we think that we need to have conversations around it. Because, like it or not, it's not an offense for someone to have a perspective or a view on something that has happened. We can't say it's illegal for you to think about it this way. And like you say, there are grown-up adults who have certain views on, and it might be a function of their values, their own upbringing, their background, what they have personally experienced. There could be a huge host, a variety of reasons. Yeah. But what we hope to do is that when we talk about it, and we talk about it reasonably, and with the intent of improving the situation. And I think when we have that starting point for the conversations, then I think people know that they should be constructive. I think that's the main point of it. There's a problem, let's try to be constructive about it. Let's toss up some ideas about what the potential solutions can be. Like I say, some of it could be legislated, some of it could be mindset change. Mindset change is going to take some time.
Yep.
It could be generational. And that's why starting from young, the role models that we have, what we are telling our children, what they see around them. Whatever we say to our children, it must also be a lived reality.
Yep.
They must see it around them. What are public figures saying? What are their teachers saying? What do they read in newspaper? What do they see online? There must be enough of this around so that the young person grows up, perhaps as a child, knowing that this is more right.
Yeah.
Yep. Not to be righteous about it, but this is more healthy. This is more constructive. And at the end of the day, is it right for you to look at women this way? Is it right for you to treat a vulnerable person that way? Especially when no one is looking. Because the thing about the law is that it's one thing to say that if you do this, a policeman will come after you.
Exactly.
It's another thing to actually have it innate.
Yep.
And you know that it is morally not right for you to do that. I think that is the best regulator.
Yep.
Not the policeman.
What are the measurable steps in working or like having the mindset change that kind of roll out beyond just like legislation? Yeah.
I don't think we can set strict timelines. When mindset change is concerned, you can't say in 5 years we will have this mindset change and the next 10 years we will have that. Unfortunately, I don't think we can get down to that level because it's perhaps not physically possible, and different people go into it with different starting points, a point that you have raised before. Yeah, but looking at how society has evolved, it was perhaps just 50 years ago, whereby I think Singapore was perhaps even more conservative, more patriarchal compared to now.
Yeah.
But society has changed. It has evolved. We see it. It has happened in Singapore. So I think we can be positive about it. And the white paper and the series of conversations around it is an active push. And I think as long as we reach out to as wide an audience as possible, and we touch on areas that it's not like esoteric, it's like people know it. They personally have seen it. I have a lot of faith that if we as a society think that this is an important issue for us to discuss, and the issues that are identified are topics that people know for a fact is happening around them, or that these are privately their thoughts, that they've had before. I have a lot of faith that actually fellow Singaporeans, I think we're generally kind-hearted, constructive people, And when we know that there is a problem, I think collectively we want to do something about it. I have a lot of faith in that, actually. Yeah.
You are one of the 3 women leading this gender equality paper, and I think it does look, it is interesting considering that there are more members of parliament who are male and female, and that it would be 3 females that lead this paper. So I want to know, on your part, have you faced any, I guess, like stressors or like discrimination on that level?
I can't answer for everyone, but for myself, my own career before I joined politics, I was in the private sector. I've worked actually overseas for much of that time. Like I say, there are different power dynamics in every society. Even in industries, there are some industries that are more male-dominated than other industries. And I think what's important for women is that when you're in that industry, in that sector, you ask yourself, what are the value add strengths that you bring into your job? What are your skills? Always be confident about what you possess. Never end up telling yourself, I'm a woman, I can't do this, I can't do that. Never let your own mindset become that limiting factor. And when we come across instances where we feel that certain things have happened and it's not fair, I actually feel that women, we owe it to ourselves to bring it up. I think we should always have honest, open conversations, be it with our line managers, with the HR, because if you're going to be in that sector, in that industry, you're going to have to be happy working in that environment, In this time and age, any company, any organization, I think they know that they are being held to standards.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, in Singapore. There's nothing stopping a woman from going to TAFEP, MOM, to say that this thing has happened to me. I want MOM, TAFEP to investigate. Nothing stopping him or her. A private sector company ought to know also that their reputation is important. So I think employers know that, though I would say that it can be, it is likely not uniform across the industries. There are MNCs also, and then there are small, medium enterprises, and different companies may have different HR cultures. But I think our society is one that is open, is transparent. The government agencies are there. I think what we want to also do is to ensure that people know what numbers to call and who to email, And as long as their concerns are channeled to the relevant agency to look into, I have a lot of faith that the agencies will follow up. So that has been my experience in the private sector. In public office, first and foremost, I'm a member of parliament. I walk around my estate a lot, I meet many Punggol residents. The demographics in my ward is a very young one. Largely young families. I'm slightly older than my residents, perhaps about 5 years older. They're very open with me. Hand over heart, I have not felt discriminated against. Though once in a while, not frequently, an older person may say, you're so young, you understand what I mean or not, I haven't had someone say, hey, you are a woman, I don't think you can solve my problem. I haven't had that said in my face. I don't know whether people think that way. I think the fact, right, that they don't say it in your face is already an important point.
It's true.
Because they know it's not right.
Yeah.
To say that. Because if it's like very rampant in society, like someone can just walk up to you and say, hey, I think you're a woman and I don't think you're capable of solving my problem, then I think as a society we have a problem, because it's considered normal, which it shouldn't be, And I think largely, based on my own personal experience, I have not seen that happen. Yeah.
It does seem as if like, it's not that you are held to an unfair standard, but there are different kinds of markers or indicators that they kind of look at as you as a woman compared to like you as a man. Do you ever feel that kind of like pressure, or that you're just like sick of it, Maybe not sick of it, but like pressure, I guess.
It is interesting that you mentioned this actually, because I was in a recent dialogue with Madam President, with SCWO, the Singapore Council for Women's Organizations. And Madam President brought up that she had read online that there were various comments about what the women office holders wore at the swearing-in ceremony at the Istana. Actually, I didn't know that beforehand. So I went to Google, and my first impression was, wow, people paid attention to what I wore that day. And there were obviously quite a few remarks that were not altogether positive, And then after that, I thought, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but that's in itself quite sad, because the swearing-in ceremony and appointment is a formal one, and I was, of course, very, how should I put it, very grateful for the opportunity, and also, proud of the moment. Is like, I'm taking up my responsibility. I have responsibilities for, fellow citizens, and all sorts of thoughts were going through my mind. And then at the end of the day, when you read online that actually what people were thinking about was what you wore, then you're kind of like, duh, yeah. That's why, coming back to the topic for today's discussion, that's why I think the conversations are important. What I'm saying right now, I hope someone would read, and a young man would read and say that actually maybe next time before he makes such a comment online, that he knows how other people reading it feels, and actually it reflects on the person who makes that comment, don't you think?
Yep, 100%.
100%, right?
Yeah.
So I hope that consciousness seeps through. Yeah.
I want to know, I guess, like, how do you juggle both roles, especially with like your daughters being so young, right? And then particularly that you are in this position that you are in now, talking about gender equality, family violence, stuff like that, very experiences that you would probably relate to on a personal or very personal level, right? How do you envision, like, I guess, the Singapore that you want your daughters to grow up in to be like?
Yeah. I really love children, There is just something about being around children, that it really makes me very, very happy. I'm not saying it. I'm just, it really makes me feel that way.
I can feel it.
You can feel it? Oh dear. It must be very maternal. And, when I look at children, and when you tell children something, you can see the sparkle in their eyes. They are listening to you intently, listening to what you're saying. And sometimes, even though they may be playing or doing something else, actually subconsciously they're absorbing all the signals that you are putting across to them. Sometimes in the environment that you create for them, sometimes in the words you say, the body language and everything. They are like, people say they are like sponges. And it's true, they are absorbing all this information, consciously, subconsciously, sometimes without the adults realizing it. Back to the point on what I mentioned about when I speak to a child and I see the sparkle in their eyes. Whatever that we are saying now, the future we are building, it is our children who will inherit it and be a part of it. And because of that, I feel that we actually have very, very heavy responsibilities.
Yep.
Because 20 years down the road, when they become adults, they go into society, the culture, the work environment that they face, we had actually, whether we like it or not, 20 years ago, set certain things in place, taken steps in a certain direction that they will end up facing when they grow up as adults. And actually, that is the reason why I say that, before I sleep, I think about children, I think about my daughters. When I wake up, I feel that way also. Because I'm at a point in my life, right, where actually what I want to achieve or how far I can go, I have a certain understanding, a certain view of where I am already. I'm already in my 40s, At this point in my life, right, the things that are going through my mind is, what can I do for our children? When we are building, we're really building for our children. And I really do feel a strong sense of responsibility. So what is it that I hope we can build for our children? I think fundamentally, we must ensure that the society that they go into, continues to be a fair and just one. I think there is nothing more debilitating to a young person, right, than to feel that whatever I do, I cannot achieve. That somehow my station in life, the opportunities that are given to me, it's not fair. I think that really kind of just is so, it really, for a young person, and I've been there before, it really makes you feel that I'm nothing, life is not fair, those opportunities were not given to me. And it could be a function of, which school I studied in, my parents, the work that they did, where I stay or whatsoever. And it really, really shouldn't be. And I want to do my part to ensure that when our children grow up and become adults, that they know they have a fighting shot at it. There may not be equal outcomes, but they must have equal opportunity. Yeah, and when they look at Singapore, they look at developments around them. They know that Singapore is a fair and just society, and that we'll always help the vulnerable in our midst. I think as a society we need to have that kind of a culture, that broader, that principle that we stand for. Then only that way, I think our young people will be motivated, to fight, to continue to participate, and to continue to have these values and principles, to continue them, and also in their way pass it on to their children in the future. That is what that drives me. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. My husband is very hands-on. I have a very busy work schedule, so my husband is a very, very hands-on father. And I must say that when I talk to colleagues, when I talk to the families around me, because like I mentioned, I serve at Punggol, many young families, I find that many young fathers are actually very actively involved. No longer that, father equals sole breadwinner, means spend a lot of time outside home, means doesn't take care of children. No, it's not like that. A lot of fathers are very involved. Nappy changing, sending the kids to childcare, on the weekends, getting involved in household chores. I think that's quite the norm. And I think that's a very, very positive thing. It should be that way. Yeah. So on your question as to what do I tell my children, actually, to me, I don't make it gender specific, but there are certain universal values that I think are important to inculcate to our young. To me, the most important two values, I hope, and I've been talking about this to my children, is to be kind and to be generous. If you are born into a family whereby, when it comes to resources or whatsoever, you have more, then I think you should be on the lookout to see how you can help those around you. My children always say, sharing is caring. I actually quite like that a lot. I always remind them also, sharing is caring. So when you have something, share it. And that leads to the next point about being generous. Generous is not just about generosity with finances or whatsoever. It's also about a generosity in spirit. About when people have different ideas from you, or they are differently abled, you must be inclusive. You must be generous in spirit, in heart, and not miserly, and whereby you see there's a difference between you and me, and therefore I try to draw a line between you and I, and treat different people differently. All those little things, I think from a young age, we should be role models as parents, point it out to them, because sometimes children are very innocent. They just say what they see, and very honest. They are not ill-intentioned, they're just plain honest. But when they say certain things that could be impolite, then you have to remind them that actually you really shouldn't say that. You will hurt someone's feelings if you say that. Would you like it if someone said that to you? So that's what I remind my children. And I think it's terribly important. And I think when you have fundamental values like that, kindness, generosity, in spirit, then I think when you start at an older age considering things like gender roles, people who are different from you, people who come from different backgrounds, because your starting principles are kindness and generosity, then I think you have a very good chance at being a very nice and good person, and being a constructive person in society. And you can bring your friends and family and the community along with you. I mean, if we take a step back, the conversations we're having, they're called conversations on women's development. But the larger issues are also about the women's roles in society. And a role can't just be singular on its own, right? Because roles interact with others. So men, their feelings, the outcomes that they see are also a function of the women's roles vis-a-vis them. That's why I mentioned earlier that the conversation has to involve both men and women. And I have no doubt, that as long as we can get men involved in the conversation, and I hope they step forward to do so, that they would surface their views on the matter. I'm hoping that when we look at it, we don't look at it as zero-sum and as antagonistic partners. we don't need to look at it in a kind of a conflict kind of a manner. Let's look at how we can work together. I think a woman is happy if the man in her life is happy, and a man is happy if the woman in his life is happy. So how can we collectively be more happy? I think that should be our starting point. Yeah.
I want to know if there's any last golden nuggets of wisdom that you have for our audience, because I think, like I mentioned, most of them are
Tough.
young people between the ages of 18 to 27. So if there's any words of wisdom you want to impart?
I hope that each and every one of us, when we go about our daily living interactions, that we be kind in our thoughts, kind in our words, and also kind in our actions. Because for everything that you say or you do, it impacts someone else. And I hope that is something that each and every one of us can have a bit of consideration for. That is what I consciously try to remind myself, and also to the immediate people around me. I think when we collectively make that effort, right, then I think Singapore can truly be a fairer, kinder, more generous society. And I hope, especially with your target audience being many young people, that they can join us on this journey.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. It was really exciting for us to have a Member of Parliament down on our episode to talk about an issue that is the basis of which we exist: gender equality. If you're tuning in to this episode and are wondering how you can be involved and have your voice heard, rest assured the team involved in the white paper want to hear from you. All you need to do is to register your interest at go.gov.sg/sgwomen. That's all for this week's episode. Remember to subscribe to us and follow us on social media at Something Private Pod.
Tune in to the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.